Good morning. It is Friday, the 5th of December. I'm Maeve McMahon, and this is Europe Today, Euronews' daily live fix of European news and analysis. Coming up today, the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz is here in Brussels for a last-minute attempt to convince the Belgian government to come on board with the reparations loan for Ukraine. The Belgian Prime Minister fears that Euroclear, the clearinghouse that holds most of the frozen Russian assets, would bear the brunt of any Russian legal actions in the future. This, as US envoys hold talks with Ukrainian negotiators for their third time in 2 weeks. That's in Florida. For more on what exactly we need to know, I'm joined here in the studio by Euronews Ukraine correspondent, Sasha Vakalina. Good morning. Sasha, lovely to see you here. What should we expect from these talks in Florida? I'm afraid to say, but I really don't have any hope that they will lead to anything.
There might be some progress there, because what we know is that the Ukrainian negotiators, specifically the head of Ukraine's Security and Defense Council, Rustem Umerov, they did go to Florida. Why? This is their way of kind of getting an update from Steve Witkoff, Trump's envoy, after his meeting with Vladimir Putin earlier this week in Moscow. And this is what Volodymyr Zelensky, Ukraine's president, had to say about the content of that meeting in Florida.
Today, Ukrainian representative will continue talks in the United States with President Trump's team. Our task now is to obtain full information about what was said in Russia, what other reasons Putin found to prolong the war, and to put pressure on Ukraine, on us, on our independence.
I've been told by some sources close to the negotiations that one of the biggest issues is the fact that the Americans seem to be on board when it comes to Ukraine's sovereignty, but not necessarily Ukraine's territorial integrity. And of course, these two aspects are going hand in hand. It's like one thing for Ukraine and for Europe, but not necessarily for the United States. And another confirmation on the fact that this is a big issue is coming from this reported leaked call where President Macron reportedly said that there is a possibility that the US will betray Ukraine on territory.
So the Europeans, of course, very concerned. And today we're seeing emergency talks. Friedrich Merz, the German Chancellor, is in town. He'll be dining with Bart de Wever, the Belgian Prime Minister, and Ursula von der Leyen, the Commission President. Will they not chew over their Belgian frites or choke on them? Because they're clearly not going to get an agreement on the frozen assets.
Certainly. Friday night, Brussels, that's the definition of emergency talks, right? And we do know that Merz reportedly had to cancel his trip to Oslo to be here. So this is really those last efforts and attempts to convince the Belgian Prime Minister to get on board with that. European Council President Costa, he had a call with Zelensky yesterday, and he said that the decision on securing Ukraine financing will need to be taken before the summit. And the summit is coming, of course, on the 18th and 19th of December. The time is indeed running out for that one.
And meanwhile, of course, Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, is in India observing the whole situation from there.
He is, and he's been also issuing more threats, specifically threats towards Europe from India. Now, he said that it was Europe's fault that Russia started its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. He also commented a little bit on his meeting with Witkoff, saying that it lasted for 5 hours and that he was kind of getting tired of such a long meeting. And, of course, he issued once again the threats that Russia is ready for war with Europe, saying they're not going for it, but it is ready, and he said there will be nobody to negotiate with from Europe if they start to do anything. Open threats are coming from Moscow, from the Kremlin, ever since the beginning of this week, May.
OK, Sasha Vakalina, thank you so much for that update here on Europe Today. But now, coming up, we'll be joined by Dan Jorgensen. He's the Danish politician from the Social Democrats, who's held several major national and European roles. And since 2024, he's been the EU Commissioner for Energy and Housing, focusing on trying to wean the European Union off its addiction to Russian gas. Commissioner Jorgensen, welcome to Europe Today.
Thank you.
Lovely to have you with us this Friday. Now, of course, there was a big historic deal announced this week that the EU will fully phase out Russian gas imports by 2028. Tell us more.
So, yeah, basically we've been in a very uncomfortable situation, being dependent on energy from Russia. Obviously, it's not a nice thing to be dependent on energy from anybody, especially not from an enemy.
Completely addicted, yeah.
On the other hand, also, we have to acknowledge that buying energy from Russia has also had other effects. It has helped indirectly finance the war in Ukraine.
So why did it take you so long?
Yeah, so I used to be a member of the council as an energy minister from Denmark, and I was one of the ministers that argued from 22 that we needed to stop this as soon as possible. The reason why it hasn't been possible is that unfortunately not all countries agreed, because normally you would do this via sanctions and then you can do it fast, but it demands unanimity, and we haven't had that support, unfortunately. So what this new commission decided was that, okay, we will choose another way to do it. So instead of using sanctions, we have used the prohibition, so we will actually ban the gas. This has another advantage also, which is that when there is a peace, which we hope there will be soon, that will not mean that we will then just start buying gas again. This will stand also after a peace agreement, which I think is good, because we should never repeat the mistake of becoming dependent on Russia again.
And what will the decision mean now for our viewers? Will their energy bills go up or down now this winter?
No, we're ready for this decision. So we have brought down our consumption of gas in Europe overall, which is one of the reasons why we can do this without it leading to spikes in prices. But we're also working very hard with the countries that will be most affected to make sure that they have alternatives.
But what about countries that are not on board with this phase out? I'm thinking of Hungary, Slovakia. We saw Viktor Orban, the Hungarian Prime Minister, just recently in Moscow. He said he will take you to court for this decision.
Well, to be honest, I don't really understand these countries. I think we should stand together shoulder by shoulder against Putin to help our friends in Ukraine. But okay, this is the way it is. We will still help the populations of Slovakia and Hungary, even if their governments do not support this legislation, to make sure that also the citizens in these countries, of course, have access to cheap energy.
So the devil will be in the details of this deal. I mean, one thing is launching the historic deal this week, the announcement, and then, of course, implementing will be key.
We've worked very hard on this for quite a long time, so it is something that is happening gradually, and it's something that we can do in a way that will not have big negative effects. It will, on the contrary, have a lot of positive effects, which is that we will no longer be able or have to live with being blackmailed by Russia. Russia's blackmailed certain countries in the European Union. We've seen Putin weaponize energy against us. That, of course, is not a situation that is sustainable for Europe. So this is very, very good news, I think, for the European Union.
And EU regulators will be kept busy making sure there's no circumvention here as well.
That's very true. We need to be very strict in the way that we control this. It's also true that people have said, well, okay, this is the gas, and that's the most important thing, but what about the oil? Because there's also still some oil being imported in Europe, and also here we have said that needs to stop. So
and that's on your plate for next year.
I will put forward very soon a legislative proposal to make that happen also. So in 22 we got 45% of our gas from Russia. Now we get just over 10%, and that'll go away completely. We got 27% of our oil in 22 from Russia. Now we get 2 or 3%. So it's not a big amount, but still that needs to go away completely also.
And meanwhile, of course, you are diversifying to make sure that we don't run out as well here in Europe.
Yes.
Dan Jorgensen, Commissioner there for Housing and Energy, thank you so much for being our guest on Europe Today. And as I said, of course, Dan Jorgensen is also responsible for housing. And it's the first time, in fact, Brussels appoints a commissioner in charge of housing. And with the picture across Europe pretty dire, it is a huge responsibility for the commissioner. Jakub Janis reports.
Dear Diary, living with your parents has its perks. Free laundry, zero rent, and dinner is always on the table. It's fun when you are 15, but is it still fun when you are 35? For a record number of Europeans, the mom and dad's hotel isn't a luxury. It is an economic necessity. The latest data shows the average European now leaves home at the age of 26. But statistics lie. If you live in Finland, you are likely independent by the age of 21. But in Croatia, you are stuck in your childhood bedroom until you are over 30. It is the same story in Spain, Greece, Italy and Slovakia. And just look at these numbers. Just in last 5 years, rents in Lisbon exploded by 81%. Prague's jumped by 73%. That is almost an extra rent on top of your monthly rent. and even a bit more affordable cities like Warsaw are now becoming out of reach. Finally, it is fine to rebel in your teens. But what happens if you can't escape that stage? Research suggests this crisis is eroding support for the center-left and fueling anti-establishment sentiment. Housing is technically a national issue and the EU isn't supposed to touch it. But the pressure is so high, Ursula von der Leyen appointed the first ever commissioner for housing to intervene. But let's be real, bureaucracy moves slow and rents move fast. Anyway, I gotta go. My mom is calling me for dinner, and yes, I already washed my hands.
Jakub Janis there with his daily dose of humour, but also hard facts on a very serious topic. And now moving on to another story that's turning our heads here at Euronews in Brussels, and that is the unrest in Bulgaria. After days of protests across the country, the government has put its controversial 2026 budget plan on hold. To hear what exactly is going on and what it means for the stability of the country that will actually be joining the Eurozone next January, we can cross over now to Sofia and speak to Raya Stoyanova, that's Euronews' Bulgaria correspondent, who's live for us this morning just outside the Bulgarian Parliament. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Just tell us, are these protests against the budget or just against the government?
Good morning. Let me start with the fact that there is a lot of political tension right now in Bulgaria. Just yesterday, there were a few protests all over the country. Here in the capital, protesters were outside of the Ministry of Interior. They wanted the resignation of the minister. But where did it all started? On Monday, there was one of the largest demonstrations here in front of the Bulgarian parliament. People went out on the street to express their dissatisfaction with the budget plan for next year, but the frustration grew and they started demanding the resignation of the government. And what is happening right now, the government is making a new budget plan for next year. However, there are still planned protests for next week. But what are the protesters demanding? Let us hear now.
We protest against this fundamental budget because it threatens to seriously harm a large portion of working Bulgarians, the middle class. This is unacceptable. We need serious reforms.
A budget for over 100 billion euros to be distributed during the parliamentary recess is simply scandalous. Nothing that could have supported the people protesting outside, small, medium and micro businesses or NGOs, was approved. Everything was rejected by the overwhelming majority that currently dominates the parliament.
So Bulgarians, they're furious with both the government and the budget proposals. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, Raya, Bulgaria will be joining the Eurozone next January. That often can lead to sharp inflation. Are people also worried about that transition?
Yes, in just 26 days we are going to join the Eurozone and become a full member of the European family. This process now is irreversible. Many experts in Bulgaria say that this is one of the best decisions for our economy. However, most people are still afraid because of the higher prices that will come with the euro. The problem is that those fears are pushed by some of the political figures in Bulgaria, such as the president and some of the nationalist parties in Bulgaria. So one of the other problems is that if the budget for next year isn't ready on time, we will enter the Eurozone with our old budget. So to sum up, right now there is a lot of political tension, and just a few minutes from now, right here in the parliament behind me, the opposition will submit a vote of no confidence against the cabinet. What will happen, we'll expect to see.
OK, well, we'll keep a very close eye on that. Raya Stoyanova, thank you so much, our correspondent there in Bulgaria. Well, this does bring this edition of Europe Today to an end. Stay with us, though, here on Euronews for more news and analysis. And we'll be back on Monday morning with a new edition. See you then.